Today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show, Kentucky Democrat State Representative Daniel Grossberg, obviously I added the gross part, but Daniel Grossberg is back in the headlines this time when his old persona now has resurfaced from college. He went by apparently Sketchy Dan and wrote advice columns as Sketchy Dan. It's coming back to haunt him. We'll go over that story. Jefferson County Public Schools continues to help the school choice amendment pass as their busing plan has been sued in federal court for being a racist. And the not so temporary but not temporary, but temporary structure that is being built in Frankfort to house the state legislature as the Capitol building gets refurbished. I've mentioned it before, but a recent hearing on the project and its inflating costs tells us the entire Capitol project costs are pretty out of control. I'll go over the numbers and point out to you just how crazy it's gotten. So we're going to have all that and more today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. And I know I have not been as reliable putting out the shows the past few weeks, missing a day or two a week. I greatly apologize. It's just been a super busy time for me and my family, back to school, work, all those things. But we shall be back to a more regular, ongoing schedule here over the next week or two. I promise we will get it done, and we will make sure we keep the shows coming out each and every day for everybody. But in the meantime, if you want to reach out to the show, make sure you email info@theandrewshow.com. Once again, that's info@theandrewshow.com. One of today's stories actually was supplied to us by a listener emailing into the show. So for those of you who are unaware, I do read these emails, and when you send me stories and links or send me information you have, any kind of proof that I can operate on and dig in further into, I will go ahead and do that, and I appreciate it too. It saves me from having to do as much research. That's one of the reasons why there hasn't been as many shows coming out with time consuming. It's not just the time to record the shows, but I do like to bring some original content. I like to talk about stories you're not hearing everywhere else. But in order to do that, I typically have to do a fair amount of digging per topic I talk about, just to, one, I kind of know where to dig to find some of the stories or find some more of the details from just experience, but also because I want to be able to bring perspectives on even things that we're talking about on everyday life, even if they're common, bring perspectives you're not getting elsewhere. And so that's time consuming. It takes time to dig in. And I don't want to just slop together a show unless I feel like I'm delivering content that is insightful, meaningful, and is delivering new information to you, the listener. And so I just wanted to plug that for a second. And while I'm at it, please make sure you like, comment, share, subscribe. Wherever you're listening, leave a review, a 5-star review if you're listening on a podcasting platform that allows that. Share with others, tell people to tune in. I do see a fair amount of growth over the past few days, though. I've had a few more subscribers across all platforms. I believe the podcast has now crossed over 1,000 subscribers on all platforms. It's well over 1,000 if we throw in YouTube subscribers. But on just podcast listening platforms, we have surpassed over 1,000 subscribers on all platforms. We'll continue to grow, so continue to share it with others. But without further ado, let's dig down into it. So the Daniel Grossberg, for those of you who are unaware, if you don't remember the story leading up to this, but he has come under fire. He's under investigation from the Legislative Research Commission because of inappropriate comments he's making to lobbyists and other special interest women, late night text, inappropriate messages. That's what he's being accused of doing. He says he's innocent, or it's not as bad as they're making it out. And then shortly after that, the Democrat House caucus removed him from the caucus, said, we don't want you here. The young Democrats have removed him, calling on him, to drop out, to withdraw, to remove from caucus. They don't like him either now. So, where there's smoke, there's typically fire, and just the amount of willingness the Democrats have to cast him to the side tells us, and I talked about this on a show, that there might be a fair amount to these stories. Well, we've got another hit coming at old Daniel Grossberg here, and it comes from his college days in 2003. Now, this story was broke by the Herald Leader, so that's where most of this information's coming from. I did dig a little bit more just to sum it up for you guys, but that is where the information's coming from. And so back in 2003, Daniel Grossberg was going to college in Grinnell, Iowa. For those of you who listened to the show a few times, remember I talked about how Daniel Grossberg from Grinnell, Iowa, as a student, or that was living in Grinnell, Iowa, as a student at the same age as him, had wrote into a gay publication talking about how he wanted to be a woman. Well, apparently that wasn't the only writing he was doing. Apparently he was writing quite a lot for different newspapers, and he did something for the school newspaper, apparently, where he did a quote-unquote comedy column in the school newspaper where he went by the moniker Sketchy Dan, and he would make up advice letters to himself and then respond to his advice letters with like sketchy, weirdo advice. Just to give you an idea here about, here's some of the columns for you. A writer named Creepy and Clark asked, "Dear Sketchy, I think the girls in my hall are scared of me. They always think I'm hitting on them. You have some experience in this area. What do you suggest?" And then Sketchy Dan, which is Grossberg, replied with, "Hold a floor meeting where you threaten to sue anyone who calls you creepy for slander and proceed to ask each one out individually for a romantic reconciliation dinner at Rube Steakhouse, followed by an erotic foot massage." Here's another one. Anxious and Annick said, "Dear Sketchy, I have been seeing this girl for about a week now and want to kiss her. How long should I wait?" And Sketchy Dan replied with, "A whole week and no play. She's clearly a prude. Find yourself a new one." Another one of the stories here was, "Dear Sketchy, I'm interested in a girl in my class and I don't know how to go about approaching her. What do you suggest? Lonely and Lagan." And Dan wrote, "Email her and tell her you like the perfume she was wearing that day, and tell her you thought her comments in class were insightful. If you don't hear back in an hour, write her again. Give her another hour. If you still don't hear, try calling. If she's not in, go to her room and wait with roses and a computer projection of what your children would look like." So, obviously, very weird columns. Keep in mind, Grossberg wrote the initial premise himself, So it's not like somebody wrote this and then he thought, "Oh, I got to come up with a joke to it." No, he's like, "I want to make this joke, so I'm going to go ahead and pretend to write this letter into myself to go ahead and be able to write my response to myself because I think it's funny." And, I guess it can be humorous, but creepy. It's creepy. So you got the letter he wrote into the gay magazine reportedly. We have the Sketchy Dan sketches. We have the fact that the Young Democrats say that women amongst their organization has had him being sketchy. And now of course, we know the lobbyists came out about it. So Dan's got quite the torrid history. So you may be wondering, how does old Daniel Grossberg, how does he wrangle out of this one, right? How does he make an excuse for the fact that he's just a creepy, strange, weird guy? Well, he's come up with a novel defense, and that is that he is mentally challenged. I'm not kidding you. That is literally what he's saying. He's saying he's a mental disorder. This is from his lawyer, Anna Weitz. She said this in his defense. "We didn't know what those were 10 years ago, and even today, a lot of people who have not put in the work and time to educate themselves on autism spectrum-related behaviors are still discriminating against people because we find them weird or creepy because they don't act like the rest of us." So she claims that he's been diagnosed with some type of autism and that he's being discriminated against, that when he's acting inappropriate with the women, well, that's just because they don't understand him. He's being discriminated against because he's autistic. He can't be expected to control himself. I guess he saw the success of Love on the Spectrum and thought to himself, well, everybody thought that the kind of weird, quirky, strange things that they did was so lovable and cute. Well, maybe I can just claim to be autistic like them, and then my strange, quirky, strange things that I do could be just considered autistic things, and people, instead of being grossed out and calling for me to be removed from office and kicking me out of the caucus, will instead just say, "Aw, that's so cute. He made inappropriate comments to a lobbyist while being married with children. I guess he's just a little autistic, and that's okay. I guess that's what he thinks will happen. Of course, that shouldn't be what happens. He should, of course, be held to account for it, and I don't think he'll necessarily get away with it. I understand why you think he might try. I mean, after all, Joe Biden was able to hide up dementia, hide the fact he had dementia for a long time by claiming he had a stutter. And so I guess, I can see why he thought it might work. I don't think it's going to play for him. It is an interesting defense, though. We'll see if I'm mentally challenged, so if you get mad at me for being sexually inappropriate with you while married with kids, well, that's on you. You're being discriminatory. We'll see if that old defense plays here in Kentucky, here with the Democrats in Kentucky. It may. They have lost their minds in general, but we'll see about that. So this November, there will be, of course, a school choice amendment on the ballot for you all to vote for. Vote yes for Amendment 2. That is not contrary to what the anti-school choice, pro lock your kids into government schools and indoctrinate them for the rest of their lives group says. It doesn't put in place a voucher system. It doesn't put in place Christian schools only receiving whatever. It doesn't put in place only rich people receiving fancy private schools. What the amendment actually does is nothing other than allowing us to have the conversation. If the amendment passes, there's no guarantee a year, 2, 3 years from now that there will be funding for people to send their kids to private schools through a voucher system. All that says is there can be a political debate on the topic, because right now, the way our Constitution is wrote, we can't even talk about it because anything that we pass gets knocked down by our state legislature. And we're one of only 2 states in the country that has this issue or has no school choice options at all. But of course, the public school system is super fighting against this. Democrats are super fighting against this in a way they haven't fought against this in anywhere else, because normally a lot of liberal states, Democrat states, they actually have school choice options in a lot of those places. But here in Kentucky, the Democrats are taking a different tune because of how much money the teachers unions are shelling out, and because it's like this last vestige of place for money into the Democrat system, because they're the last donors to it. I mean, think about it this way. If the Democrats can't even keep school choice from being passed and have no say-so in that, and can't use their apparatuses and their influences in order to try and, stop this amendment, they prove that much useless. The school unions will no longer care about really giving money to Democrat legislators because they have nothing to offer them. So that's kind of what's going on. But, so you'd think the Democrats, since they're super fighting against this, would be doing everything they could to go ahead and make sure it doesn't pass. But it seems like the Jefferson County public school system in Louisville is literally once again doing everything they can in order to convince you to vote yes on it. And this is from WDRB. Jefferson County Public School leadership said Monday they're confident in the plan to get students to and from school on their first day back Thursday, promising the brand new plan is a step forward a year after chaos enveloped the start of the year. Let's not forget that, this supposed step forward, that what they're talking about is last year's kids not getting home till 10 o'clock at night. We'll see how it goes. But in a back-to-school news conference Monday, JCPS Superintendent Marty Polio said students will be back in school Thursday despite the district's argument in federal court Friday that the first day could be pushed to November if a temporary restraining order is granted in a civil rights lawsuit filed in June by 2 parents. So basically what happened is 2 parents, a Mary Bledsaw and Tyron Bell, their kids attend magnet schools. So within public school systems, the larger ones, if you don't live in Lexington or Louisville, there's these magnet schools. And in Lexington, the magnet schools are not an entire school. They're like programs within a school. So like, for example, I believe Lafayette and Lexington has what's called the SCAPA program, which is like an arts and performing arts and things like that program. So if you're gifted in the arts, you can go to SCAPA. Dunbar has some sort of math and science, like STEM program. So if you're really good at math and science and the STEM fields, Dunbar offers you more opportunities in that. And so though you can send your kids there even though it's not the kids' actual high school. Well, in Louisville, they have entire magnet schools that you can go to. And what typically has happened in prior years is that the public school system, they could pick up your kid from your house. They would then go to the bus depot switch. Kids would switch on to the buses that then would take them to their magnet schools that they then attend, and then they do the opposite the next day. Or in the afternoon, they'd get on the bus and switch back. And this is the closest that we have to any kind of school choice option in the public schools, where if your kid is gifted, but you don't have the means to pay to send them to a specialist school, to pay them to a school that can really develop their abilities, their gifts, their skills, well, you have this public option available to you to foster that. And I cannot understate how incredibly important things like magnet schools are. And that's why I support school choice, because a school can't be everything to every child. And having what could be some very brilliant children that find themselves in positions where they become engineers or scientists or performing in arts even, if that's your bag, and taking those kids that could be in that position to do those things, but are unable to do so simply because they can't afford a private school to teach them about that. That's a travesty. That is costing our society future and opportunity. So they recognize this too. This is what's crazy. The public schools recognize this because they created the magnet programs in the first place. They recognize that they need to create special programs for these kids. Well, what if it wasn't just the really smart kids who had that choice to go to a special school? What if kids that wanted to do better in certain subjects, no matter their whether or not a public school system has deemed them worthy or not, had that opportunity, had that choice to them? That's why I'm for school choice. But anyways, over the fact that they can't bus these kids to the school, these two parents filed a lawsuit claiming that the district's bus plan passed in April disproportionately negatively affects students of color and violates their civil rights. What they're saying is that this is the fact of the matter, and this is why those who are against school choice cannot say they care about typically, underserved, underprivileged, right? So what they say is that in Louisville, just so happens, demographically speaking, those who are, of lower socioeconomical class happen to be minorities. It's not the same everywhere. If you go out to eastern Kentucky, those who are of lower socioeconomical class happen to be mainly white. Okay, it's just something. Let's not take it too far. But looking at that point, okay, well, these magnet school programs help underprivileged children who happen to be not white have more opportunities than the white children who, by a larger percentage rate, happen to be better off. And so when you take away their magnet schools, it hurts them disproportionately because they're the ones who don't have the means to take their kids to a private school or to transport their kids across town. They don't have that kind of money. That's why being against school choice means you're not for those people. Because guess what? Here's a dirty little secret. And if you listen to the show, you know this. My kid goes to private school. I can afford to send my kid to a private school. I don't need school choice or a voucher for me to be able to send my kid to a private school. But I live in this society with a bunch of other children. And not all of their parents can afford to get their kids out of the abject failure that is our public school systems in this country and specifically our state. Kids, by and large, are not proficient in math and reading. They are failing. And I want to offer everybody else to have the opportunity to get their kids out of that failing system. Not to help me out and my kid, but to help out our futures. So everybody has an opportunity. Because these people grow up to vote. These people grow up to, be either a drain or a contributor to society. And I want to give them the best chance possible to be a part of society. But JCPS is out here so committed to dragging down everybody else, to the lowest common denominator, that they need to get sued for their bus plan being racist. Completely ridiculous. I have one more story for you I want to go over. So the Frankfurt Capitol has been under renovation now for like years. And there's a recent hearing on this going over the expense of this Capitol. And it's getting pretty high. So total renovation of this has now reached nearly $300 million. I will say it will go over $300 million easily in total cost. That is absolutely crazy and ridiculous. And a part of the cost here, and I've talked about this on the show, is that they're building a temporary, but man, it sure looks permanent, but temporary, but sort of kind of permanent building over top the parking garage that is next to the Capitol building to be the temporary for like a year legislative chambers while the Senate and House legislative chambers are being reconditioned, are being updated, are being repaired. And I've talked about this. Why didn't they go to like, there's so many other places where they had options to hold this at. They could have went to KSU's campus, Kentucky State University's campus, and held session there. They could have went to the old Capitol building. The Senate goes there once a year. They would have taken a little retrofit, right? Would have had to hook up maybe some AC systems, that pump through the window, but you could have went in there. You could have ran the audio and stuff and done it for a year. We're talking about a short session. We're talking about 30 session days. So you only have to be in that room literally 30 days. Literally 30 days. You can still do all your committee hearings in offices there and then do your session in that room. So you could do it there. You could do it, there's the caucus rooms. You could fit those up possibly to work. You could go into a convention center in town. You had so many other options before you for those 30 session days. But instead they decided to go ahead and build a temporary but kind of permanent, but temporary legislative chamber over top the parking garage. It's decisions like that that have made this project now balloon to looking like it's going to cost more than $300 million. And I want to put that in perspective because I don't think you understand how much money that is until you look at the history. So in 1906, the Kentucky Capitol building was completed and finished building. And the way it was paid for actually was in large part through some of the Reconstruction / Civil War money. So, the federal government used a lot of things in Kentucky, obviously during the Civil War. And so they sued saying, hey, look, we need to be compensated for that. And won, and they took a lot of that money to go ahead and build a new Capitol building. And so in 1906, they built the building for basically about $1.2 million for the building. So it's $1,180,434.80 for the building. And then $639,565.20 for landscaping, furniture, power plant, and architecture fees for a grand total of $1,820,000. So this is building the building, furnishing it, landscaping it, doing all of that costs a total of $1.8 million. Now, if we take that $1.8 million and apply inflation to it, that's the equivalent of $62 million today. They will spend about 5 times more than the Capitol building originally cost to build, to renovate it, 5 times more to renovate a building than it costs to build said building. It's absolutely ridiculous. There is no good excuse for this kind of spending. There's no good excuse for this kind of out of control behavior from our legislature. We need to be asking questions. Is this important? Do people need to do it? I mean, they have to understand. I get it. You got your surplus. You think you got the money. Let's go ahead and do it. We want to be in a nice building or whatever. It's historic. It's hard to recondition things, but surely you must think spending 5 times more than a building costs to build. Surely that deserves us taking a look at. I mean, let us remind you that, let's see, 300 million is about 4 to 5-ish percent, probably about 3-ish% or so of our general fund. They're spending 3% of the money made off your taxes just to update a building and build a temporary chamber because they couldn't find a cheaper way. It's absolutely ridiculous. Well, yes, that's what we have time for today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. I thank you all so much for tuning in. I know, like I said, episodes have been coming out late. They've been coming out not at all on some days. I apologize. I got to pay my bills, though. I got work I have to do. But we will be more regular, back to our regular times. Should be here right around next week. But thank you guys for tuning in. Please bear with me. Appreciate it. Remember, send your emails, info@theandrewshow.com. But we'll see you back here possibly tomorrow. Have a great rest of your day.